My name is Wayne James. I was born in Charity Hospital, I believe, on March 10th, 1964. Um, this is not the first house I lived in. I first lived for a time as my mom was almost died having me, and we were both in the hospital. So I went from the hospital not to my parents' house, but to my grandparents' house, where I stayed for some number of weeks or months. And then when I was well enough, I went home with my mother and father to a house in east of here. Um, so the way we got to Mandolin was after my mom and dad divorced, and again when I was an infant, we moved back to my grandparents' house at 2120 Law Street. That is a family house everybody knows, and stayed there till I was age 7, when my mom married Lloyd Young, my father. Um, my my other father, my biological father, Terry James, and my mom divorced when I was an infant, and then Lloyd became another father. Um, and we first lived near here in an apartment complex called Park Chester, about a mile from here on Owen Street. And then about a year later, they bought this house on 1301 Mandolin. And so that's how we got to Mandolin. I lived here. I probably moved away from here during college. And in around Hurricane Katrina 2005, the most of 80% of New Orleans was flooded, including this house. And my parents labored, Lloyd and Mama labored over whether to stay here or not. They decided not to, and they were going to sell the house to the government, but the government was offering them too little money. I tried a bunch of different things to try to get a good price. Couldn't. Didn't want to see my parents suffer such a loss, so I decided to buy it from them and fix it up myself, which I did, and had every intention of selling it. But in 2008, the real estate market crashed and the economy crashed, and I wound up holding it to rent it. So that was 2008, and then from 2008 to about 2011, I was about to, after the tenant moved out, I was going to sell it again, but then this brand new thing called Airbnbs and short-term rentals came up, and my brother's family was getting larger, and staying with Uncle Wayne in his few rooms he stayed in was not an option. So I thought if I could rent Mandolin short term and make as much money short term as I could long term, then and my brother could just pick a date to come and have a house to stay in, that would be the best of both worlds. And I decided to do that right before the Super Bowl in 2012, where I knew I'd make some money, and I did, and it kind of worked out and it didn't, because it turned out that this house made a very good vacation rental, was one of the few in New Orleans at the time, so it became booked all the time. And so my brother wound up still having the same problem of not having a place to book, so I got some other vacation rentals. And still to this day, in 2019, Mandolin is still a vacation rental. But I was some other vacation rentals, so it would be available for my family. The story of my birth, what was relayed to me by my mom and others was that I've always had a bad sense of direction. So I was supposed to be born on March 6th, and I was supposed to go down, but I decided to go up. My aunt Elizabeth, everybody calls her Boo, despite it being Mardi Gras, one of her favorite days, she spent the whole day in the hospital waiting for me to be born. And I didn't come, and then it became more problematic, and I began to hurt my mother by going up instead of down. So they decided to force labor. In the midst of that, in the emergency that happened, my mom says she remembers the doctor saying, "Oh my God, I don't know if I can save either one of them." So my mom excitedly screamed, "Oh my God, Lord have mercy, Jesus, save my child." And as all the stuff was going, that was one of her memories. Maybe they knocked her out or whatever. But she told me later that the doctor reached all the way up, turned me around, and pulled me out. In the process, that became the weakest part of my body, my clavicle, which was broken or injured somehow during the birth. and I had some other injuries, and my mom had some major injuries getting a 9+ pound baby out that way. So I was in the hospital for weeks. My mom was in for a longer period of time. My grandmother, who I had a grandmother-mother type relationship with because she was the first lady who took care of me, cared for me. And as a matter of fact, my mom got out of the hospital, she wasn't satisfied like the doctors were, that she was well enough to take care of me. So my mom would not give me back to my grandmother would not give me back to my mom. My father had to sneak me out of her arms late in the evening and get me back to their home. That's how I wound up going back to the house in the park where my parents had. So that's the story of my birth, and so, but I never remember living in that house because they divorced when I was an infant. Mm-hmm. So the first house I remember living in was my grandparents' house, and my mom didn't want to live there either, but my grandmother told her, even though she was 30 or 31, that only loose women live without a husband. So she had to go and live, even though she had a job, she had to go and live with her mom. So I always grew up with a male figure, and my father, Tyree James, he was they were divorced, but he was a present, weekends, summers father. My grandfather was a really hardworking guy. I don't think he had to work as much as I got older, but I've always been a person who hunt around older people, get in their wisdom, and I guess I felt I had a special relationship with my grandmother, but all of us did. I've never, to this day, experienced pure love from an individual the way I've experienced it from my grandmother. You just were not. You always knew that she was always praying for you. She was always on your side, and she would do anything for you, or really any children, anywhere. So I've got a lot of wisdom from my grandfather. I think that he made the transition to my mom marrying Lloyd, and and him taking his proper position as a father easy by saying to myself and my brother that, listen, I love you, but you're going to live in Lloyd and your mom's house, and unless what's happening is child abuse, I'm not coming to save you, and you shouldn't call me. It's their rules. So he made it very clear that it was his house and his rules. Unless he was doing something against Scripture, then it went his way, and that would be the case with my parents. And so that made it. I think that made an easier transition, and also Lloyd made it an easy transition too, because even though divorce is not the best thing at all, in the aftermath of those decisions, God gave myself and my brother a lot of grace because we wound up with two great fathers. And I can, and Lloyd's my father. You can call him stepfather, but he's my father, and my dad. And I had a good dad who I knew after the divorce. School life was interesting. I have always had high expectations, mostly from my mom and my grandmother. And a story in grade school, maybe first grade, my grandmother, when I was still living in her house, right? I thought I had done well, always wanted to please her. I came home with a 99 on a math exam. And she looked at me with such dismay about the 99, and I was very confused, and almost a tear to her eye. And she said, "Son, I'm sorry." I said, "Mama, what do you mean? I made a 99. She said, No, you did everything right. The teacher made a mistake. You made 100, and she made a mistake because you're the smartest little boy in the world, and you don't make mistakes like that. Not my grandson." And so she's one of the smartest people I ever met. She was doing mental jiu-jitsu, and she was making it impossible for me to not do my best and not bring home hundreds. So I was, from that moment on, I didn't want to disappoint my grandmother and not make her right, even though intrinsically I knew the teacher wasn't wrong. I kind of understood what she was trying to do. So, but be that as it may, I made good grades, and I was even, I think, at the top of my graduating class in 6th grade or whatever. But clearly my older brother, Brian, was always smarter than me, intellectually speaking, book smart. And so that actually provided some cover for me because liked to play football, liked to whatever. I wasn't crazy about reading. I could do well in school, but if I just do well enough, then that was good enough for me. And because Brian loved school and loved math and loved all of that stuff, you know, and I was good, but I was never pressured to be good because he was the person he clearly saw as the book person. He gave me a lot of cover, except for when even 6 years later I'd be in the same teacher's class, and she said, "You look familiar, son." I said, "Are you related to such and such and such?" And they get to Brian. I said, "Yes, my older brother." I said, "Oh, well then you know this lesson," and they have all these expectations of me. So they hadn't forgotten Brian 6 years later. That's when it might be pressure, but otherwise he gave me a lot of cover. And I was able, even in high school, in junior high school to some extent, you know, sometimes to make, B's, and that'd be okay. And I knew I was capable of more, but I didn't like all the studying I saw him do in college and what have you, and I figured I'd pick it up later. So that was a bad decision, but okay. So you'd asked about school experience. So I really remember, and I'll get to the other story you want, but I really remember there was a real turning point in my life, sometime around fourth grade. And fourth grade, I was at a school in this area called Bienville, elementary school. And as I said, I wasn't always doing my work and the most studious student the way my brother was. But sometimes I'd do it quick and I'd just be bored and I would be a discipline problem. So one day, Tyree James, my father Tyree James, had to come to the school to see about me. He had to take off from work. That's very serious in a black family that, you know, doesn't have all the money in the world. So he took off from work and he whipped me in front of the class and he took me outside to talk to me and he sat me down and had the most mature conversation I've ever had with an adult. He said, "Son, look, this is the last time I'm coming to school for you." And he said, "I don't know if you realize it, but your mom and Lloyd and I, we're not going to take care of you for the rest of your life. And what you do here in school is going to determine your place after school. And I know you like to eat, so therefore, I've never broken my word to you, and I'm not going to now. So therefore, if you continue to clown around in school and don't put yourself in a position to be successful, then it's going to fall all on you. And you have a lot of loving, giving people in your family, but make sure nobody gives you anything. And we're going to be in our air-conditioned houses, having all the food we want to eat, and you'll be wherever your work takes you." And from that moment on, I believed him, and I was at least a better behaved student. I think that was the end of any behavior problems. Because I really didn't realize, I don't think too many children realize, that their parents are going to take care of them forever. And they really need to take care of business in school. So, speaking of business in school, you know, since I was in school so much, sometimes there were business opportunities in school. So, having saved money and having grown up in environments where, for instance, this house is only a block and a half from was notorious St. Bernard projects. So being around a lot of people that don't have money and being a child who could save money or make money from my own businesses, I always had a little money in my pocket. So sometimes that created an opportunity because somebody would want to borrow money. And I figured that was an opportunity to make money on money or interest, as my grandfather explained to me one of the greatest American principles, compound interest. Because you can double your money in 3 years at 22% interest. So I started loaning money to kids that I knew I could beat up because they'd have to pay me, and they would pay me. And then I realized people had other weaknesses like gambling. And so I really had no interest in taking bets on games when I realized in 7th grade that people did that in junior high school. Some of those same people that had problems with being broke and having money paying me back, they also would bet on games. So I started getting a newspaper and letting them bet on games. And I made sure the odds were close enough, and I really didn't care who won or who lost. But when I would win, they would owe me money, and invariably they wouldn't have the money, but I would only lend to people, again, who who I knew would be in threat of being hurt, and I actually bought some muscle in addition to that for a small price, and I started hoping I would lose, or when I would win, if it would be a nickel a day interest on the dollar. So I made a lot of money in what was a bookie operation until one of my friends ratted on me, and my parents had to come to school and shut it down. So that was the bookie business. I also had a business in junior high school, more legitimate business, where they shut down a concession stand, and so I got as much in a couple backpacks as I could of soft drinks and candy, since I had that experience at 7. And I freeze the soft drinks, and I'd sell out every time, and so much so I'd have to hire a couple guys to get a couple more backpacks, and I had a whole stand going on. It goes without saying I grew up in a loving, God-fearing family, and have had good friends too, and I've had occasion to sell to my friends, and in African American families, business doesn't go over that well. For some reason, so some people were offended. But I mean, I've even sold to your dad. When chicken wings didn't come out of the grease quickly enough, he would buy the chicken wings for 25 cents a piece. Supply and demand. So, but anyway, so that's, my mom encouraged me not to sell. It killed her for me to sell to my brother or family members, but to me it was always business. Everybody always has a choice, even children. Very firmly rooted in the Lord and in His family, and having my first memories of growing up in my grandparents' house. You definitely had to love the Lord and go to church and learn as much as you can about the Lord. So that was my environment. But like a lot of children who grew up in that environment, but because you always go to church and everybody goes to church, I had to come to my own understanding of the Lord, and I was always more curious. So I understand more now, loving the Lord with your whole mind and spirit. And so I always liked Sunday school and understanding. And we grew up in a kind of traditional church where there was a couple of scriptures and then kind of ran and raving. So church wasn't my most fun place. It was understanding with my mind and my heart. And when I came to that understanding at 13, I went up to the altar, and I really understood what I was doing, because we had some good teachers in Sunday school. My grandmother and grandfather were Sunday school teachers, and by that time too, I had been going to Bible study with your dad. I think at age 11, to a separate Bible study apart from our church. So I really understood what I was doing. I gave my life to the Lord. But it really started earlier than that, and it really started in a rebellious way. And the Lord used it in my favor as He has done so many times and given me so much grace. Back when I was 7, and I was talking about how the Lord allowed me through my rebellion to learn more about Him. I didn't want to go to sleep, so like a lot of other children, I tried everything in the book to not go to bed. When my mom shut me down every which way, I finally did something that I the only thing I knew, the only reason my mom would allow me to stay up, I said, "Mom, I want to read the Bible." I knew she couldn't stop me from reading the Bible. So I pretty much stayed right here in the living room, and where there was no TV, and I would pretty much fall asleep. I really wasn't going to read the Bible, but there was nothing else to do. So I'd fall asleep reading the Bible, and I started in the beginning in Genesis. And as I began reading through it at age 7 to 8, I had questions from my mom. I was like, "Are we Jewish?" So, and when she couldn't answer a question, and somebody else would be available to answer a question, and I got in the habit from an early age of reading and trying to understand the Bible, even though I was reading it in church and lessons and whatever, but it was different at home, and so my parents really encouraged it. Now I'm not sure how long I kept it up that way, but whenever it was time to go to bed and I didn't want to go to bed, I'd just go read the Bible. And I wasn't a great reader, so but that began my curiosity. The other thing out of my own rebellion too that God used is like a lot of older siblings, He would have to take his brother along with him. Well, my brother, who was a great big brother because he loved the Lord, was always a great moral example for me. He was going to, on the weekends, he was going to Bible study, right? But he'd have to drag me along to an adult Bible study and explain why this child was there. But I had some knowledge of the Bible already. And so after a while of listening, I was able to ask some questions. So by the time I was 13, I really had an understanding, such an understanding of the Word that I could even ask questions or even contribute to the Bible study. And and of course he didn't drag other people in the family like Janelle and Eric Rose. They were at the Bible study with a lot of other people that you've met that are Brian's close friends. They were all at that Bible study. And so was your mom eventually. So. Yeah. So moving on from junior high school, which was Gregory Junior High School, to McDonald 35. I really was undecided about where to go to school, but my mom wanted me to go to a school I didn't want to go to. I'm not going to mention, but I saw McDonald 35 and you had to take an exam to go there. I didn't know that, so your dad drove me and we were late because of me getting there, but somehow I managed to pass the exam to get in, and it was the first college prep class of McDonald 35. So God just put me in a good place. But still, even especially in high school, your dad was already taking, since he's 6 years older than me, he was already taking college prep classes in high school. And he's a really good student and really at the top of his class. So I was really able to go under the radar in terms of, and I wanted to play football and stuff too, and not, concentrate so much. So I would, like for a math class, I wasn't crazy about math, but I would just make good enough grades to make sure I made a B. In courses I didn't like and courses I liked, I might make an A. But if you brought home A's and B's, it would be okay. So even to the extent that I realized I was doing too well in math and I could fail the exam, I just failed the final, which was crazy because it caused large gaps in my knowledge. And my plan was that, I didn't like the life I saw my brother leading, coming home every day with all this extra homework and advanced whatever he was in. So I thought I would just step it up in college. Well, I get to college, and I'm in the freshman math, and there are these large gaps in my knowledge, and I really belong in remedial class because of it. But so that's kind of how I got through that, and also something notable about school for me until about high school was I was really kind of shy. It wasn't until teachers started calling on me or people started talking to me because they thought when they called on me that I knew something. And I saw how valuable that was from my perspective. I always digested something from a business perspective that maybe there was a class I didn't like home ec, and I could do somebody's history homework and they could do my home ec work, but if they didn't know that I knew the stuff, then it wouldn't be worth anything. And that's when I learned too that doing well in pretty much anything to be successful is more than just studying hard, but it's making friends and influencing people. And if you really don't talk and you don't negotiate, then you really don't get to benefit from that success. And I even learned then that you really need to add value. And if you want something, like if I wanted something from you, I wouldn't start with what I wanted. I would start with how could I help you? And then once I helped you, you might feel inclined to help me, or I can more easily ask you for what I want. And to me, it was always a negotiation. And so I was already in business, and so I started seeing things more broadly as business transactions and bringing value. And I realized I was doing that in the midst of children, but I always had that more mature perspective of that. Well, you asked about the especially the adult, but especially the male influences in my life. So you grew up in the families that I grew up in, and you get to become a child who is a man raised by real men. And what I mean by that is, they tussled with us from an early age. We call it beating us up, and they're rough enough with us without hurting us for us to not fear anybody but them. So if I go outside, I'm not afraid of bully or whatever. I'm afraid of coming back inside saying that I got bullied by somebody, right? So we don't run, we never will, and that's a perspective. And also, coming from humble beginnings, certainly my grandparents being in poverty, my mom, us not having a lot of money growing up, and listen to the stories, which were true stories about them not having much, about my grandfather not having much of anything but providing for so many children, and my grandmother, about my mom doing without, about my father Lloyd quitting school to take care of his mom and his family, and about my father Tyree James struggled to finish school and taking care of his family. So after you hear those stories, and if you have any type of a perspective, you don't want to be the child asking for money or whatever. So it was good that God blessed me to have some businesses and have some money. And so my parents were always big on education, but pretty much from the age of 13, I made enough money to not really have to ask for a lot of money. And I took some pride in that because that was their story and I needed my story. And so don't get me wrong, my parents helped me, and if I asked for something, if they had it, I would have it very quickly. But knowing that some of the struggles and whatever, you didn't want to ask for it. So for that reason, I was blessed pretty much from age 13 when I had a number of businesses going on. Throughout 9 years of school after high school, 3 degrees in 9 years, I pretty much was blessed to work or get scholarships to make it through school. As a matter of fact, I remember one time when I told my mom I had kind of off the cuff decided to go to law school, that she was about to retire as a teacher, and she said, "Oh my God, I can't retire. How come you tell me? I got to help you in school." I said, "No, Mom. If that's how I have to go to school, I won't go. So you go and retire and do what you do, and I'm going to do what I do." And so God blessed me to be able to make it. But it is wonderful to have that experience. It's wonderful to be able to, and I realize how blessed I am, especially in my community where so many people grow up without fathers, to be blessed with two great fathers. My father Tyree James, he was involved in my life, weekends and summers. My parents, I don't have the divorce story about parents arguing in front of you or whatever. It wasn't. None of that stuff is easy, but they tried to keep the drama away from us, and they did, because I'm not sure. I don't know if there was any drama. I'm not aware of it, and they worked together. I believe that both my fathers had a good relationship, and they put the egos aside to make sure things were going well with myself and Brian. So and Lloyd, he could have just been a stepfather, but he was a real father. He was there. He and my mom both thought that they should help me more in school, they would have, and they did, because I lived here most of the time in school, and I ate free, and so they helped immensely, but I didn't let them help as much as they wanted to, and I think that helped them do some other things. But they had a tremendous amount of trust in me, and the values that they instilled in us are much more valuable than any money. A work ethic, like watching. I never remember my mom missing a day of school. She loved the teaching. I saw, and she didn't get sick really. She was not a sickly person, but I saw Lloyd sick, like pneumonia type sick. But he would always get up and always go to work. And so if I, in my working life, I thought about that every time I thought I was sick enough to to miss work. So for that reason, I don't remember. I can't remember the last day I didn't do any work. So it's just my life and I enjoy doing the work that I do, and I'm blessed to do the work that I do. So that's kind of the background I have. And also, speaking of, strong males, I think that my brother, who was older during the divorce, he was more guarded about me. And so if there were any gaps, they were probably taken up by my grandfather, but my brother was always there. So he was since he's so much older than me, he was a brother/father figure. And he's always been more mature Christian, better student, better whatever. So I was talking about your dad and him filling in a big brother father role through the divorce and remarriage transition. But what's interesting too about him wanting to help me in school. I mean, my parents wanted to help me in school. Your dad also wanted to help me, and I remember being in law school, and I was usually working a couple jobs or whatever in law school, and he said he was disappointed in himself that even though he was older and out of the house and whatever, and he wasn't able to help me financially, and he regretted that. And it's amazing how families that don't have money concentrate so much on money, because I told him that the example that he showed me, an example of the other people in the family showed me, was much more valuable. You can't really buy a character, and I really didn't need the money. I really needed the hard-working example that I saw and the sacrifice. A lot of my life has been informed by the people who raised me. So one of the main people who maybe didn't spend as much time with me as my parents, but my grandmother, when she was, we were close because of that thing about her taking care of me right out of the hospital. When she was on her deathbed, she made me promise her a few things that really informed my life and the questions that you asked me just now. And one of the things that she had me promise her was that whatever I decided to do, I wouldn't embarrass the family. I would be the best at what I decided to do. That I would get as many certifications in what I decided to do. And this is a lady that had an 8th grade education, no lawyers in the family, no accountants. So she said, son, just work hard. Be a street sweeper, be a clerk, work for the post office. Whatever you do, just distinguish yourself to be the best at what you can do, to make the family proud. So having made that promise, when I was in high school and decided I wanted to be an accountant because I like money, right? And because when I was 12 years old, I went to an event that my Terry James took me to, and he didn't have any money, but some people at the event had money, and he pointed out a guy to me, Adam Hydell. He said that black man over there is a millionaire. So I hadn't met any millionaires, especially black millionaires. And so I said, Daddy, can I talk to him? So he didn't know him, but he went and introduced me and said, hey, my son wanted to meet you. And I said, sir, I have a question for you. He said, yeah, what is it, son? And I said, how do you become a millionaire? And the whole room got quiet because I kind of said it kind of loudly. And he said, good question, I'll tell you how. He said, you need 3 things. You need a good accountant, a good lawyer, and a good relationship with a banker. And so as I learned I decided to be an accountant. I decided at that time I was going to hire a lawyer. I was going to hire a lawyer, and I decided to try to get close to a banker. So having some of those goals in mind as I matriculated through high school and going into college, I actually actively talked your dad into becoming a banker. It was hard because he was this brilliant biology person and whatever, but he eventually wound up, I didn't really talk him into banking, but when the opportunity came up, I kind of was very excited about it. And he was a banker for a while. I never wanted to be a lawyer. Not like those people who dreamed of being a lawyer. I was in school one day about to graduate from college. No, about a year or so from graduation. And one of my professors brought me into her office and wanted to talk to me. And she said, Wayne, what are you going to do after school? I said, what do you mean what I'm going to do? I'm tired of being a poor, struggling student. I'm finally get a job and eat what I want and have what I want. She said, no, you're much too bright. You need to go to graduate school. So she set up lunch downtown with her husband, who happened to be an attorney. He talked to me. He told me I could do what I want to do. What was I interested in? I told him I was interested in tax accounting. Because by this time I was in UNO and I was in tax accounting. And he said the words that my grandmother said. Well, son, if you really want to go as far as you can go in your chosen field, you really need to go to law school and be a tax attorney. I said, no, I'm going to be a tax accountant. He said, no, the tax accountants really prepare the way for the tax lawyers. And again, he said, when my grandmother said, you really want to go and go as far as you can go in the field, you have to go to law school. So I labored over that, but I said, okay, I'm just going to apply to some law schools. I don't have any money. There's no way I'm going to make it. I'm not going to ask my parents for the money. They don't really have that much for some of the schools anyway. So I just thought I would check the dots, keep my commitment. And speaking of that, the men in my family are really, really big on the biblical principle of better man lose great riches than his good name. So of all people, if I was not going to keep my word, I had to keep my word to my grandmother. She loved me too much. She prayed for me too much. So I wanted to make sure I did that. So I did that to the extent of taking the law school admissions exam and applying to 3 law schools that were free to apply to. I expected not to get in, and I expected to go on my plan with being an accountant. I wanted to getting a full scholarship to every school I applied to, unbeknownst to me. And this is incredible because remember, I'm not the student that my brother is. But anyway, so I had to keep my promise to my grandmother, and I really didn't want to go, but I begrudgingly went to law school. So that's how I wound up going to Tulane. And I was trying to hurry through Tulane so I could finally make some money. But a couple years into law school, the dean called me in his office, who kind of owed me something because he underestimated me about something. And he said, Wayne, I just want to tell you you're doing a great job, and I hear you. I know you want to be a tax attorney, and you put that story, which broke my heart, about your grandmother in your application about why you go to law school, and I remembered that, and I wanted to tell you, you probably don't know it, but if you really want to go as far as you can go in your chosen field, there's another degree that's an advanced doctorate in law, advanced of a law degree called an LLM in tax. And I think you would do well, but there's really no money. I mean, this time there's really no money. There's no scholarship money for that. So I wanted to keep my word to my grandmother. I applied to some more programs and told my story. And it really was no money. By that time, I had gotten really good at making friends and influencing people. And so I called some deans, and I called admissions office, and I bugged a lot of people. And I wound up getting a scholarship to NYU's tax program and some others, and also University of Florida. And they were number 1 and number 2. I really wasn't the student. I had no business being in those programs, but I basically talked my way into them. And I got a full scholarship from the University of Florida in a teaching fellowship. So I'd have some spending money. So that's how I wound up going to the University of Florida. And 9 years and 3 degrees later, I honored my commitment to my grandmother, and to go as far as I could go in my chosen field. I went so far, as a matter of fact, that I was the first LLM tax attorney in the history of Louisiana. And there was another exam I didn't know about until I got back to Louisiana called the Board Certification in Tax. So I took that exam, and it's the first African American. So my grandmother really set all those things up by just making me the best street sweeper that I could be. Now, the whole time in school, there was a conflict between me being in school and spending so much time in school and my heart as an entrepreneur. I really never had a desire necessarily to go to college or those graduate degrees because I knew I could always make money in a business. But I must admit that, being my own account, being have my own accountant and my own lawyer, and to some extent a relationship with a banker. but I never got a loan from your dad in that way. Has helped me, but I would have wound up going to business. So really my business plans wound up being delayed. Even though I had some side hustles in business, I really couldn't concentrate on my own business. I did taxes through school and did people's tax returns. I did work related to school throughout school. So I was talking about the fulfilling my promise to my grandmother of the 9 years of school and 3 degrees, where I finally got to the point where when I thought I'd gone as far as I could go in training and certification as a tax attorney, and it was one more thing, which was to pass the exam I didn't know about as a board certified tax attorney, and God blessed me to pass that the first time. One thing that discouraged me from keeping that promise that I know today that I didn't know, I know today that I didn't know then. I always thought that the payoff from a training or certification or education came when they actually handed you the degree or the certification. And that's not true. In the 9 years that I went through of the training to be an accountant and an attorney and tax and corporate attorney, each year or each time period where I received more knowledge, I was actually more qualified to take on some other type of job. So I was blessed to get different types of jobs and the different skills that I had, either as doing taxes, which I was blessed to by my parents to let me actually do their taxes when I was about 19. As a matter of fact, they allowed me to help them make some decisions in their finances at 13. I have to say that talking about people being smart, like my older brother, Lloyd has a tremendous intelligence that where he could have done the work he's doing now. He could have been in college or whatever, but he could analytically see how I processed information and how my interest in making money and organizing money and whatever. And he put me right to work as early as 13, helping the family make those decisions. Anyway, but back to the skill set for any younger people. I'm 55. Listening to this and considering whether or not you're going to go to school for 4 years or you're going to get 6 months certificate in whatever type of training, I highly encourage you to do that, because as my grandfather Moses Brown said, they can't take knowledge from you. So as you increase in knowledge, even when you don't get the actual degree, you still are more valuable. And as my brother once told me when I was discouraged and didn't think I was going to get one of the degrees because it was so hard, he told me, paraphrasing the Bible, that all labor bears fruit. So don't be discouraged if you don't finish. Just don't be afraid to get started. I want to talk a little bit about my mom. My mom is really, really like her mother, like the grandmother I spoke about. She's a really, really special lady. She was, and she had the luxury of knowing what she wanted to do from an early age. She knew she wanted to be a teacher. She was passionate about it. She loved it. She loved it so much she couldn't believe that people would pay her to do it. She had such a great passion for that. She didn't necessarily have as much of a passion, and it wasn't her dream to be a mother, but she had a natural ability with children. So, but as long as that didn't get in the way of her passion of teaching, then that was fine. She has the type of intelligence that my brother has with the book intelligence, but she's more dangerous than he is. She also has my type of intelligence too, which is a survival business type of intelligence. And even though my mom never had a passion for business, she could have easily have done that. And I think I don't want to speak for my brother, but for both of us, my mom presented a particular challenge because we have such big personalities and we don't mind talking. We all talk other people. That it's kind of easier to influence other people to our way of thinking, but it's not that easy, and was never easy to influence my mom, because she could always outthink me, always outflank me, and always have the argument before I did, and I'm not used to that with hardly anybody. And it's like fighting against both she and Brian together, which I never usually had to do. So it could be frustrating, but it always made me better, and she always gave me wiser counsel. So as I said, she was an extraordinary person. She was a saver, and so I learned saving from her too. She didn't know as much about investing, but she was open-minded, and she and Lloyd gave me a chance to. They were always my first clients for anything, and Lloyd won't let go of certain professionals, so I still do his taxes. It's the only person's taxes I still really do consistently. Well, it's interesting. Like a lot of things, like my love for the Lord, and whenever success is something. At least monetary success is something that I went into the wrong way and wound up, God helped me get it into the right way. And I'll explain it like this. I had that dangerous thing the Bible talks about called love of money. And so I was, from an early age, was one reason that motivated me in the business at 7. I didn't like not having money. It's interesting, I'm not a material person. I don't have a lot of things to spend money on, but I just liked having money for the love of money. So it was a challenge growing up in a family I did with the love of the Lord. It's kind of, hard to intentionally do wrong, but I got to say that that I actually have a mind, that can dream up criminal ways to make money or fraudulent ways, but I've never really been able to really embrace that side of me because I never wanted to embarrass my Lord or my family with any of those kind of schemes. So I've been able to keep from that. But growing up from early age all the way up to my teen years, I probably crossed the line a little bit, with some of my money-making schemes for the purpose of just making money. And so as I knew more and I learned more about the Lord and what I believed, and I do what I'm still trying to do now, which is get my life in conformity with my beliefs. I was able to the doing the right thing and doing it for the right reason was able. God pulled me over more toward making money the right way. So, and as I began to make money, and that was my kind of definition of success, even that ran counter to how I was raised and what I was learning biblically. So my current definition of success is really more of a health issue. It's spiritual health, mental health, and physical health. And I've heard different people talk about this in different ways, but some of the ways that they talk about it is they divide it into different stages of monetary money coming into play in different ways. There's survival, where you just need enough money, even if you're poor, just to have food and raiment and maybe a roof over your head. There's security, where a person or a family gets to a place where they have enough money for the basic things, and now they also want a secure, safe place to live, a better house, a better environment. And then when you pass security and you can pay all your bills, even if you don't have a big emergency fund or what have you, you start to get to a level of affluence where you get to what most people define as monetary success, where you have not only everything that you need to survive, but you begin to have things that you want. A lot of people get somewhere between that stage of security and success. Very few people get, especially people who want material things, get to the point where they have everything that they desire. Since I've been blessed with a spirit of contentment, a long time ago I was at the point of having not only everything I needed, but everything I wanted, which also helped me save a lot because there wasn't a lot to spend money on. So I had to really find a different purpose for making money other than the pride of making money itself, and that was easy to find in the family I grew up in. And the best person I can, again, identify with who showed me that was my grandmother. And so that stage after success, whereas monetary success, where you have everything you need, and then you can buy almost everything you might want. The next stage is significance. and that's the last stage, which very few people see. And I would define significance as the impact that you have on others' lives. And so my grandmother never had much money, but I've never met another person like my grandmother or my mother who got to teach and affect many children's lives, have such a positive impact on other people's lives. And so that became my goal, and something that would be lasting, something legacy to have an impact on other people's lives with whatever resources, intelligence, knowledge, money, or whatever that I have to have an impact on as many people's lives as I can. I've not done the job that I could do or that I've seen the people in my family do, but I'm just trying to catch up with them. And so just want to be significant, and that's what I really define as true success. I mean, what impact have you had on others' lives? You can give so little to someone, and it can be a life changer. As the people who have influenced me have given me just a little advice, just a little word of encouragement here or there, have helped transform my life into success. Also, what I can say about success is that some people call it the third door principle. And if you think about it as like a popular club that somebody's trying to get into, 98% of the people will be in that line wrapped around the corner trying to get into that door, to get in the main entrance door, because that's the only door they see in their mind. There's also the VIP door that another 1% will get through because they have a certain level of affluence or rights or what have you. And some of those people are born into money or born into power. And then you have the other people who want to get in but don't have any way in, and they don't want to take the main way in because it will waste too much of their time and resources. And so those people get in through I call the third door. And they might get in through the kitchen, or they might, like in the Bible, cut a hole through the roof to get to Jesus or see him or what have you. But they find a way in. And what I found is there's a legal way in. There's a legal, moral, and ethical way in if you're just persistent. And there have been many examples where, especially growing up as an African-American male, there's just no normal way in. Like when people told me, why are you going to be a tax attorney, Wayne, or a tax accountant? I'd be the only African-American in my class, and accounting class at the University of New Orleans, or they say there are no African-American tax attorneys. What makes you think that you can? Well, because I've seen other people in my family, and I've seen people, how the Lord has affected them. And I say, well, why not me? Instead of you say, why me? Why not me? And when there was not when I wanted to have some of my resume for the IRS, and there was no, Loyola's law school had a program, but Tulane's didn't. That didn't stop me. I just worked with the dean to create the first internship program with the IRS with Tulane. And so there usually is another way in, which God might bless you to get in. But if you really don't know until you try. So those are keys to success, and whatever you define as success, monetary success, having an effect on other people's lives, reaching as far as you can go in terms of your spiritual, mental, and physical health. All those things define success, but money has less to do with it than, as I've lived my life, than those other things. Another thing I thought of in terms of success, and I see families do this. I see families tend to make sure somebody's trained as an attorney, somebody's trained as an accountant, somebody's trained as a doctor and a nurse. And for instance, my mother's sister, Aunt Rosanna, she was a nurse, and so she helped the family immensely, including me. When I was about 8 years old and I was choking on a chicken bone, she saved my life. But she also just provided a lot of free care and assistance, and had a tremendous, in terms of significance, she just had a great impact with her loving care and also her skills with the family. Just another person that I want to not forget to mention had a big impact on my life despite my behavior. I was a little bit of a troublesome little brother growing up, and gave anybody my brother cared about, especially a young lady, a hard time. So I think I was about 15 or 16 when Janice came along, and gave her a pretty hard time too, but she managed to survive it. And she's forgiven me about that. But I didn't know that Janice would be one of the most significant people in my life because she was able to marry Brian and take on the burden of of being so close to somebody who's like the sun, who gives so much love and nourishment, but it can also burn you. And because that's how my brother and myself's personality is, and she's been able to survive that for decades of marriage. And so, and with Brian moving out, my personality was able to blossom, and we've always worked together on whatever we're doing, and they both have been a team of spiritual blessing. A lot of the best things I've gotten out of life and learned how to do kind of started with their advice and counsel. And of course, they give me the blessing of 6 wonderful nieces and a nephew, you guys are all tremendous in your own way, and there's not enough time in this video to talk about that. But I am so excited for the future because like my mother, and I saw the best qualities of my family and my brother and myself. I see all of that in you guys and all of your cousins and all the next generation who have these pieces in place, like a relationship with a lawyer and accountant and doctors and the spiritual, and more importantly, the spiritual background and the hard work. The sky is the limit for you guys, and I'm really, really excited about what you're already doing and what you will do, what you and your children will do. So I didn't want to forget to mention those things in that context. I also want to say that because of divorce and whatever, I've gotten to know my mom's side of the family the most, but also Lloyd and Lloyd's children, namely the ones I've gotten to know. His son, who's my age, Darren, like his father, Darren is very smart, very capable. He's at the top of his game in terms of his profession, in terms of being a chef. And Eleanor does great work. She works all the time, like her dad did, and caring for others and hospice care. And they've both been a blessing to their parents. And probably the person other than Lloyd in his family who was the greatest blessing to me is his mother and my grandmother. We used to call her Grandma. She's an extremely godly woman. As a little boy, she spent way too much time in church for me. I went to church all the time when I was in the country. And I'm sorry I challenged her with that so much. But she was such a blessing with her as a godly woman and the wisdom that she had, and how she raised the family without a male figure for such a long time. What happened with her husband. And of course, I told you that Lloyd had to mature way too fast for that, but he took on the responsibility and the other children. So Lloyd had some siblings too that impacted me, and some of his friends too. So just a whole village of people had a great impact on me. So you asked about success, and I kind of wanted to isolate it. I talked about it from a perspective of a Christian and grew up in a Christian background, but we're more than that. That's probably the most important part of us. But we're also African Americans growing up in this society with its legacy of slavery and everything else that's come from Jim Crow has come from that. And it's interesting what the perspective is of others. How the man is keeping you down, but I think that we were raised in a little bit of a different way. First of all, my God is the God of the impossible. So to the extent that no matter what my orientation, culture, skin color is, myself and God can empower me to do whatever people consider to be impossible if I'm faithful, if it's in His will. So to that end, that's the perspective that I strive to have whenever someone would tell me, you're just a black boy from a meager economic background, you can't do that. I would say, well, no, that's not what the Bible tells me, and also it's not the people who I see who are people of color. I don't see them not rising to the occasion. And it's really not more about where you start. You can start as poor as you could be, as my family started. It's where you end up. So it's not where you start. And the perspective, we recognize that there is a force, there's an institutionalized racism and perhaps overt racism that can supposedly retard your progress. But where we were raised is because of that, we don't have the luxury of being average. We've got to be at least 5 times better than whoever we're competing against, so that there won't be a reason to deny us a position. And even when we're denied the position, that's not a loss, because at the end, we might not see God's work at force, but at the end, He's going to have His justice. And just a quick story about that. I was in law school. I applied for my first clerkship after my first year of law school. There was a company that advertised for my kind of person, somebody with an accounting background who had a certain GPA, a certain high enough GPA, and I was blessed to have that GPA, and I applied for the position. I heard back. I waited. I didn't hear back, and I finally heard back that I did not get the position. So I went on to take a different clerkship, but it's not exactly the one I wanted. It didn't pay as much as that one. I didn't have the experience. Days later, before I could accept the other clerkship, actually I didn't accept it, I heard from them that I did get the job. So I didn't ask any questions. I just went and took the job. I didn't know why there was that miscommunication, but I was on the job for a few months, and I overheard some people in the secretarial staff talking about me and talking about how I had gotten the job, but I only heard the end of the conversation. And I went and asked them, what happened? What are you talking about? You're talking about me. And they hushed up, and I kind of pushed them, and they told me that I actually didn't get the job, that somebody else had gotten it, and they didn't have my qualifications. And the reason why I was denied was because I was African American. And they'd actually hired a political science major instead of an accounting major, and that person's grade point average was a 2.5 when I had a 3.5. And an African American attorney that worked there, the only one, found out about it, and she went to her superiors and told them that unless they called me and told me that I had the job, that she's seen a lot of injustices, but she'd never seen anything like this that they'd done, that she was going to contact me, and I would have a tremendous lawsuit. She never told me about that. Her name is Ione Renfro. She never told me about that, but when I found out about it, I was so affected because I never known anybody not to know me and to stand up for me like that. I went to her and told her how much I owed her, told her I would work for free, doing work for her private practice, and or whatever she needed me to do, because I really wanted to repay her. And she said, son, this is how you can repay me. She said, whenever you are in a position like I was in to help somebody behind you who isn't in a position to help themselves, I bet not find out that you didn't act. So those kind of influences are what influenced me towards success. And that's me doing my very best, getting all the credentials I can get, and preparing for God to do the impossible. And God's hand will be there. We may not see it. I may not have ever known about that, but God will get His justice if we just try to do the right thing and be faithful. So at the end of the day, there are these things out there, but so many other people, including biblical figures, have overcome more than we've had to face here in this country, and the victory is so much sweeter when you have those obstacles. And I see people in my family from Lloyd being the best towel and terrazzo person in what he does, and my brother being the best at what he does, and my cousins, Stanley Brown Jr. and Michael and Jeffrey Brown and Stephen, and it could just go on with all of these people, Sharon, who have all these odds against them, but they rise to the heights of their industries. And it's no accident. They put in the hard work and the faith. Just quickly filling in some gaps after University of Florida and the tax law degree, I never had, for whatever I was able to do to, God bless me with scholarships and working to get through school, I never had to make a decision between family and school or whatever. But for the first time, my mom was ill, and my brother was thinking about moving. I'm 27. My brother's thinking about moving from Atlanta back home. I said that's ridiculous. And even though I actually had a job with a tax boutique firm in Florida, I gave them back their $10,000 signing bonus, and I came home to help Lloyd take care of Mama. And I came back to New Orleans without a job, without anything. But God blessed me to study for the bar here, which I'd never taken any courses for that. And God provided a job for me, not the same kind of job, but it gave me a start here in Louisiana. And whatever my plans were, I wound up starting my legal career in Louisiana, working for a small firm. I later worked for another firm, and then for a short period of time, had my own law practice in the ghetto. Really, a kind of depressed area. I didn't know that would be a good area because it was an underserved area. Longer story, but I'm just kind of skipping through it. Accidentally ran for state representative, really unintentionally. Did way too well. Had to wind up sabotaging my campaign, because I never wanted to be a baby kissing politician. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just never saw my role doing that. Somehow that created an opportunity for me to become the first African American who was the committee attorney for the Senate Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Committee, who controlled over $3 billion worth of capital outlay projects, which I wrote amendments for, and also wrote and amended the state's bankruptcy, tax, and bonding laws. All at about age 29. Yeah, somebody submitted me, and Ebony selected me as one of the top 30 African Americans under 30 at that time. So it's interesting how life worked out, because always my entrepreneurial drive was pushing against these things that I had to fulfill because of promises like education. But then I had my dream of having my own law practice as a first real significant business, and then I got a job offer because of my dalliance with politics, and really not listening to my father Tyree James tell me a way to go. I was going my own way, and wound up working in a job that most people would kill for. Actually following the law and practicing the law is one thing, but actually getting a chance to write the law is quite another. So, but still that really wasn't what I wanted to do, because I really wanted to have my own business. I'm more of a business person than I am an attorney. So actually some years later, after working for Louisiana Senate for a while, I actually quit the best job I ever had, in favor of doing my own law practice in New Orleans. So I met a young lady in Baton Rouge, and we were married, and one day she said, if I married a guy from New Orleans, I would live in New Orleans, but we amazingly never had that conversation. So I said, well, the only way I could live in New Orleans is the best way is with my own business, because that's where my contacts are. So, but I won't know where Mike's dollar was coming from. She wasn't worried about that. She figured I would do well. And so I quit my job, with enough of a cushion to last for a year, and started my practice in New Orleans. In the midst of the practice, which God had blessed, and some other things going on, some not good decisions my then wife made, and me and my pride, we wound up separating and divorcing. And I was divorced as of 2000, and probably about 40 years old. No, about 36, 37 years old. My practice was successful, and always had some other side businesses going on. And I found myself not married, not at all the plan that I had for my life of a family and children. And so I pretty much did not, because of some beliefs that I had, I didn't date or try to remarry anything for a long time. about 9 years actually. And at a time I really slowed down my practice so much so that my plans were to close my practice. So over the next from 2000 at age 36 to a couple years later, at about 38, I became what I am now, which is semi-retired. So most people would think of that as they only hit a retired part, but I've always worked. I've worked every day of my life that I can remember since I was 7. And I haven't had a day off because those were the men. That's the example of the men that raised me. Like Lloyd, I never saw him take a day off. He always had a regular job, and then he had a side business where he would do floor and terrazzo and whatever. So, and there's something about men I think biblically men should work. I don't know if they should work every day, but but they should definitely work. So I don't really believe in retirement. But it was a real blessing because it gave me a chance not to concentrate on myself, but to be significant, to have an opportunity at least to be significant toward others. And I had sacrificed my health too on the altar of success, working so much and going to school and facing some of the things that I faced being successful in career. So I really had to slow down some to get my spiritual, mental, and physical health back together. But it amazes me even to this day that that I really started working when I was 27, and sometime around 36, I kind of retired from the legal profession. Although I'm still a lawyer and I'm still board certified and what have you, and even though I've tried to totally retire, there've been wonderful people God has brought in my life, like James Carter, who kind of pulled me back into law practice. So I'm still kind of practicing through him, more on the management level of the firm, but I also have the vacation rental business and an investment business that I do with my brother. And my brother's involved really as a counsel in all of my businesses. He's always the best counsel I get. And a person whose personality is strong enough to stand up against and defeat my own personality. And I will always admire him for his honest and wise counsel. But it's amazing, in this world where supposedly there's all this racial and institutionalized racism, where I basically, if I wanted to, could retire at age 38. And God has kept me in a place where I haven't had to get a job since 1997. So it's been 23 years. I'm celebrating 40 years in business since I was 7, and 23 years since totally not having any job of whatsoever. And that's been a real blessing. It's a blessing in some video projects that you will see coming out with James Carter and in his practice, how he's blossomed, and I'm excited about all the younger people and all the things that you guys have been able to do that I will never, whatever level of success you see me have, that I will never probably attain to or really want. Just one other thing, I kind of skipped through the marriage thing. I just want to encourage those of you who aren't married or consider being married. For me, I always heard people talk about how terrible marriage can be. To me, it was a blessing, and there were some difficult parts. But I always consider myself a happily married person until I wasn't, and it was much better and much more beneficial than I thought it would be. I've obviously been more careful about getting married again. But if I'm blessed to do that again, I had a lot of positive experiences. And as I said, there were challenges in the marriage for myself and the young lady I was married to. But God was merciful to both of us in giving, even though it ended in a way it shouldn't have in divorce. But he's still been merciful with us to still have the level of success we could have despite our decisions. And for me personally, I didn't believe in divorce then. I still don't believe in divorce for any reason now, and I did not overtly have anything to do with initiating divorce or being part of that happening. But I take my responsibility as a man should, and having more to do with success or failure of a marriage that I take. But I just want anybody watching this afterwards to know that I still favor that, and I think I would still be married right now if the decision was totally mine. So I think you asked me a question about how life is now, and I can only start with a quote from a movie I think it's called Broadcast News, that impacted me, where a newscaster was telling his colleague that, his goal was to be the top anchor in the locality, and he wanted to be the national anchor for the network. And he said to her, what do you do when life exceeds your dreams? So that's my praise report. I never dreamed the life that I have now. I never dreamed of. So the life now is not only being semi-retired, not only having a choice of being owned or owned, and obviously since 1997 I've been able to be to own, but more importantly have the freedom. Tomorrow, if I want to fly to Paris or whatever, I get to travel about 8 months of the year for pleasure. I have the luxury of being able to work when I want to, mostly on my own hours. But even though I work every day, I work a couple hours a day, and I travel for pleasure, or do other things that have an impact on people's lives that I don't get paid for. And those are the most fun things that I do. And some of the most fun things I do are talk about the Lord and talk about monetary principles the Bible talks about. And in the intersection of those, I could just talk about that all day for fun, for pleasure. So pretty much people who know me know they can call me or meet with me about anything that I know about those topics. And they'll probably get tired of me talking to them before I get tired of talking about those things. And I just have the best friends and the best relatives, all of them being human and all of them having their challenges, but they have so much more positive than negative going on, and even through the negative we grow together through challenging circumstances like Katrina or family situations that every family has. But life now in terms of my spiritual, mental, and physical health is better than it's ever been.